All right, you are looking live outside of a polling place in Atlanta as we get ready to finish off the 2022 election cycle. This is the final race of the season, so to speak. Today is the Georgia Senate runoff election. The state is seeing record early voter turnout for this runoff that will determine whether we have a 50-50 Senate. Right now, you are looking at some long lines. This was early voting in Atlanta. Boy, did people show up in droves. According to the Georgia Secretary of State's office, about 27% of eligible voters in Georgia cast their ballots early. That added up to about 1.9 million people. Democrat Raphael Warnock finished the initial election up about 37,000 votes, but that was not enough to clinch the race, hence the runoff. Now Republican Herschel Walker has one more chance to make his case to voters as a first-time politician, former football player. Let's talk about what all this means, the balance of power, legislation in D.C. I'm joined by Republican strategist Ryan Williams, former press aide to Mitt Romney's presidential campaigns, and Cliff Albright, executive director and co-founder of the Black Voters Matter Fund. Thank you to you both for joining us this morning. Ryan, let me start with you. Our partners at The Hill reporting that Democrats are pretty optimistic right now with this runoff and Raphael Warnock's chances. Would you agree, and do they have reason to be optimistic on this final stretch?
I think they've got a lot of reason for optimism. It looks like in the polls that Warnock is holding his lead. It doesn't look like Herschel Walker has really done anything in the last few weeks to kind of change the trajectory of this race. We're simply kind of having a revote. In the general election, Governor Kemp ran way ahead of Herschel Walker and obviously won his race outright, didn't need to go to a runoff. There really hasn't been any evidence that Herschel Walker's done anything to kind of win back those Kemp-Warnock voters. Not a whole lot's happened. He was very damaged during the general election with revelations of his personal life, hypocrisy, and just the general sense that he might not be up to the job. So I think at this point, you got to give the edge to Warnock heading into Election Day.
That said, anything could happen today. We've got to wait until the votes are counted. Cliff, Warnock warned his supporters against being too optimistic, right? Getting overconfident before the votes are tallied. Do you agree with that?
Yes, we definitely agree. And good morning to you. We definitely agree. Anything can happen on Election Day. We know that the voter suppression bill that they passed last year was designed to have an impact not only on vote by mail, not only on early voting, but also on Election Day voting. And so, even as we've been setting records during the early vote period, what we have to keep in mind is that when you reduce what you usually do in 3 weeks of early voting, and you cut that down to 1 week of early voting, guess what? You better set a record every day because it's a reduced period of time. That's what the intent of that voter suppression bill was. And so we've already seen the impact in the early voting. We've seen it on the vote by mail. We've had a lot of seniors that have said that they didn't get ballots that they were used to getting and expecting to get. And so we've got to be very vigilant on this Election Day as some of the other elements of SB 202, including the elements around not being able to give voters support on long lines, that's going to take place on Election Day. And so we've got to be vigilant and not get overconfident.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.